A doctor finds and operates on a girl injured in the street. When he gets home and turns on the TV, he is shocked to see the girl's photo in the newspaper. It was almost 9 p.m. when Alexandre finally left the hospital. The city was quiet, and the only sound he could hear was the occasional distant car passing by. He adjusted his backpack, feeling the weight of the day on his shoulders, and began walking toward his apartment. Walking was his way of unwinding, of thinking about everything that had happened and how he ended up here. Alexandre was a skilled surgeon, and despite being only 29 years old, he had already achieved a lot in his career. Since he was a child, he knew he wanted to be a doctor. His mother, Joanna, had always believed in him, always encouraged him, even through the tough times they faced. Sadly, she had passed away 10 years ago from kidney disease that they couldn't treat in time. That loss had left a deep mark on him. Losing his mother was a devastating blow, but it also gave Alexandre the drive to study hard and become the best surgeon he could be. He wanted to save others, the way he hadn't been able to save her. As he walked, memories of his mother came flooding back. He missed her, but he also felt grateful for the way she had supported his dreams. At that moment, while lost in thought, he noticed a small figure sitting on the curb near a park. It was a little girl, about 9 years old, crying and holding her arm with a look of pain on her face. Alexandre's instincts as a doctor kicked in immediately. He walked over quickly and knelt beside her. "Hi, my name is Alexandra. Are you hurt?" he asked gently. The girl, through her sobs, looked up at him and said, "My arm hurts a lot. My name is Alice." With his trained eyes, Alexandre quickly realized Alice's arm was broken. He knew he had to act fast to help her. "I'm going to take you to the hospital, Alice. Don't worry, we'll fix this together, okay?" Alice nodded, still crying, and Alexandre carefully picked her up, carrying her to his car. The hospital wasn't far, but for Alice, who was in so much pain, it felt like the longest ride ever. She held her arm tightly, trying to bear the discomfort. When they arrived at the hospital, Alexandre took Alice straight to the emergency room. He asked for an X-ray of her arm as quickly as possible. While they waited, he tried to distract her by telling stories from his childhood, when he dreamed of becoming a doctor. He wanted to help her forget the pain, even if just for a moment. Soon the X-ray results came in, confirming what Alexandre already suspected. Alice's arm was broken and would need surgery. The problem was, the chief surgeon, Mr. Mauricio, wasn't at the hospital at the moment. This left Alexandre in a tricky position. He knew the surgery wasn't too complicated, but performing it without Mauricio's permission could have consequences. However, seeing Alice in pain and remembering the promise he made to himself to always help those in need, Alexandre made his decision. "Alice, we're going to do this together. I promise you everything's going to be just fine," he said, smiling to reassure her as he held her hand. The surgery was quick and smooth. Alexandre chose local anesthesia to minimize risks, and soon the operation was a success. With her arm in a cast and immobilized, Alice finally could relax. However, Alexandre knew Alice's situation was complicated. She hadn't paid for the surgery and hadn't undergone all the necessary tests. "Alice, I need to take you home now. You can't stay in the hospital," he explained. "But I need to go back to my house. My mom must be worried," said Alice, tears in her eyes. "We'll figure this out together, okay?" replied Alexandre. Back at his apartment, he tried to find out where Alice lived or if she knew a phone number to contact, but the pain and trauma from the accident made it hard for the girl to remember any useful details. "Don't worry, Alice. Let's rest now. Tomorrow we'll sort everything out," he said, covering the girl with a blanket on the couch. While Alice fell asleep, Alexandre sat in his chair, exhausted. His thoughts were jumbled, mixed between concern for Alice and the potential repercussions of his actions at the hospital. He knew he would face challenges ahead, but he didn't regret helping the girl. Looking at Alice, he felt a renewed determination to continue honoring his mother's memory by helping those in need. The sun had barely risen on the horizon when Alexandre got up. Feeling the exhaustion from the few hours of sleep, he quickly made some coffee and checked on Alice, who was still sound asleep on the couch. He wrote a simple note explaining that he had to go to work and would be back soon. He left the TV on and some snacks within reach for the girl, hoping she would feel safe until he returned. When he arrived at the hospital, Alexandra barely had time to prepare for his workday. A nurse approached him quickly with a worried expression. "Dr. Alexandra, Mr. Mauricio wants to see you in his office immediately." With a tightening in his chest, Alexandra made his way to the chief surgeon's office. Upon entering, he found Mauricio sitting behind his desk with a stern expression. "Sit down, Alexandra," Mauricio ordered bluntly. Alexandra complied, trying to stay calm. "I've heard some concerning rumors," Mauricio began in a firm voice. "They say you performed an unauthorized surgery on a child last night." Alexandra took a deep breath before responding. "Yes, sir. The situation was urgent. The girl, Alice, had a broken arm and needed immediate intervention. You weren't available, and I decided to operate." Mauricio sighed, rubbing his temples with his fingers. "I understand your intentions, Alexandra, and I know you wanted to help, but there are protocols that must be followed. Your action, while well-intentioned, put the hospital at risk. I cannot ignore this." Alexandra felt an even tighter grip in his chest. Alexandra knew Mauricio was right, but the thought of letting Alice suffer was unbearable. "I understand, sir. I did what I thought was right at the moment. I'm ready to accept the consequences," Alexandra said, trying to stay calm. Mauricio looked at him seriously. "Alexandra, you are one of our best surgeons, but we need to maintain order and safety in the hospital. You're fired." Those words hit Alexandra like a punch to the gut. He stood up slowly, feeling a wave of despair wash over him. Without saying another word, he left the office and walked out of the hospital. When he got home, he found Alice still sleeping on the couch. He let out a deep sigh, trying to process everything that had happened. To distract himself a bit, he decided to turn on the TV. While flipping through channels, a news report caught his attention. It was about a missing child, and Alice's picture appeared on the screen. His heart raced. "It can't be," he murmured, grabbing the remote and turning up the volume. The reporter talked about Alice's disappearance and showed images of her mother, Vittoria, desperately searching for news. A phone number flashed on the screen. Without hesitation, Alexandra picked up his phone and dialed the number. "Hello?" A worried female voice answered. "Hi, my name is Alexandra. I'm with Alice, the girl you're looking for. She's safe and sound." There was a moment of silence on the other end before Vittoria spoke, her voice a mix of hope and desperation. "Where is she? Can I see her?" she asked, trembling. "Yes, of course, I'll give you the address, but please come calmly. Alice is a bit scared." Vittoria thanked him repeatedly before hanging up. Alexandra then turned to look at Alice, who was sleeping peacefully. He knew he needed to reassure Vittoria that her daughter was safe. Carefully, he took a picture of Alice while she slept and sent it to Vittoria with a message. "Here's Alice. She's safe and well. I'll wait for you at the address I gave." Minutes ticked by, but for Alexandra they felt like hours. He couldn't relax, thinking about how desperate Alice's mom must be. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a persistent doorbell. Alexandra rushed to the door and opened it slowly, expecting to see Vittoria, Alice's mom. But along with Vittoria, two serious-looking police officers stood there. "Are you Alexandra?" one of the officers asked. "Yes, that's me," Alexandra replied, feeling a chill run down his spine. "We need to talk. Can you come with us, please?" said the other officer, pulling out handcuffs. Vittoria, her eyes filled with tears, looked directly at Alexandra. "Where is my daughter?" she asked, her voice shaking. Before Alexandra could answer, the officers handcuffed him and began leading him out of the apartment. "Wait," Alexandra exclaimed, trying to explain. "Alice is here. She's okay. I just helped her." The officers remained serious as they entered the apartment. "Ma'am, can you show us where the girl is?" one officer asked Vittoria. She nodded, still trembling, and led them to the guest room. Alice was lying in bed, her arm in a cast. Relief and confusion flooded Vittoria's face as she knelt beside her daughter, gently stroking her hair. "She's okay," Vittoria murmured. Looking at the officers checked on Alice, who was still sleeping peacefully. One of the officers turned to Alexandra, still in handcuffs. "Sir, it seems there's been a misunderstanding. Let's clear this up right now. Can you tell us exactly what happened?" With a sigh of relief, Alexandra began to explain how he found Alice in the park, took her to the hospital, and performed the surgery to help her. Vittoria listened closely, and as Alexandra recounted the events, her expression softened. "I was desperate, officer," she said to the policeman. "I thought she had been kidnapped. But it seems he really helped her." The officers exchanged glances, and finally, one of them said, "Sir, it looks like everything is cleared up, but we need to hear the child's version to reach a conclusion." Vittoria, still shaken, thanked the officers and asked everyone to sit down to clarify what had happened. With a trembling voice, she began to recount Alice's disappearance, explaining how her daughter went out to play and didn't return, and the panic she felt when she couldn't find her. The police officers listened carefully as Vittoria described the agony of the hours that passed until she received Alexandra's call. Suddenly, Alice, still a bit sleepy, woke up and joined the group. When she saw her mom, she ran into her arms, feeling safe. "Mommy, Uncle Alexandre helped me. I hurt my arm, and he took me to the hospital. He did surgery and took care of me," Alice explained clearly, still hugging Vittoria. One of the officers looked at Alexandra and then back at Vittoria. "Ma'am, it seems there was a misunderstanding. Alexandra was just trying to help your daughter." Now calmer, Vittoria looked at Alexandra with grateful eyes. "Alexandre, I don't know how to thank you. I was so worried and thought the worst. I'm sorry for calling the police," she said, feeling emotional. Alexandra smiled, even though he was still a bit shaken. "Don't worry, Vittoria. I understand. Any mother would have done the same. The important thing is that Alice is okay now." The officers, wanting to understand more, asked for details. "Sir Alexander, can you tell us exactly what happened?" one of them asked. Alexander nodded and began to explain. "I'm a surgeon. Yesterday, after my shift at the hospital, I found Alice in the park. She was alone with her arm hurt, and she told me she had fallen and was in a lot of pain. I knew I had to act fast." The officers listened closely, taking notes. "I took Alice to the hospital where I work. We did an X-ray and found out her arm was broken. The head surgeon wasn't there, and since it was an emergency, I decided to perform the surgery myself. It was a relatively simple operation, but crucial to ensure her recovery." Vittoria looked at Alexandre, starting to understand the seriousness of the situation he faced. "After the surgery, I knew Alice couldn't stay in the hospital without all the necessary procedures, so I brought her to my apartment to take care of her and make sure she was comfortable." Alexander continued. One of the officers turned to Alice and then back to Vittoria. "Alice, is that true? Did Dr. Alexandre help you?" the officer asked gently. "Yes, he helped me a lot. I was in pain, and he did everything to make me feel better," Alice replied, still hugging her mom. Vittoria, with tears in her eyes, turned to the police officers and said, "He saved my daughter. I was so desperate and thought she had been kidnapped, but now I see that he truly helped her." The officers exchanged glances, and one of them spoke. "Sir, it seems the situation is clear now. We will remove the handcuffs." With that, they released Alexandra. He rubbed his wrists, relieved, and looked at Vittoria. "I'm sorry for all this, Alexandra," Vittoria said, teary-eyed. "I was in panic. I understand, Vittoria. Any mother would have done the same. The important thing is that Alice is safe now," Alexandra replied, trying to smile. Vittoria looked at Alexandra with concern. "But what about you, Alexander? What happened at the hospital after you helped Alice?" she asked. Alexander sighed, feeling the weight of the last 24 hours. "I was fired from the hospital for doing the surgery without authorization. Mauricio thought I disrespected the protocols, but I would do it all over again to help Alice." Vittoria paused for a moment, processing Alexandra's words. Then a determined expression crossed her face. "Don't worry, Alexandra. Tomorrow morning, we're going to the hospital to fix this." The next morning, Alexandra woke up feeling a mix of uncertainty and determination. After the chaotic events of the previous night, he knew he needed to resolve the situation at the hospital. Vittoria had promised to help him, and together they were ready to face the consequences. When they arrived at the hospital, they headed straight to Mauricio's office. Vittoria led the way, with Alice and Alexandre right behind her. As they entered, Mauricio looked up, surprised to see the trio. "Alexandre, what are you doing here?" Mauricio asked, visibly irritated. "I already fired you." Before Alexandre could respond, Vittoria stepped in. "Mr. Mauricio, we need to talk. This man saved my daughter's life. He did what was necessary when no one else could." Mauricio looked at Vittoria, confused. "And who are you?" Mauricio asked, curious. I'm Vittoria Gusmão, daughter of Osmar Gusmão, the owner of this hospital, she replied firmly. Mauricio was visibly surprised, and Alexandre was in shock. Alexandre doesn't deserve to be fired for doing the right thing. He saved my daughter, and I won't let him be punished for that. Vittoria continued, determined. Mauricio took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. Miss Gusmão, I understand your position, but there are protocols that need to be flexible in emergencies. Vittoria interrupted. I'll talk to my father. Alexandre should be reinstated and recognized for his quick action. Mauricio knew he had little to argue against the owner's daughter and nodded slowly. Very well, I'll inform Mr. Gusmão. Let's resolve this. Vittoria thanked him with a nod and turned to Alexandre. Come on, Alexandre. We need to make sure this is handled correctly. While they waited in the hallway, the presence of Osmar Gusmão was immediately felt. He arrived with an air of authority and concern, addressing Vittoria directly. Vittoria, what's happening here? He asked, glancing at Alexandre and Elise. Dad, this is Dr. Alexandre. He saved Alice's life when she was in danger. Mauricio fired him for acting quickly in an emergency. We need to fix this injustice. Vittoria explained, her voice full of conviction. Osmar looked at Alexandre, assessing him for a moment. Dr. Alexandre, tell me exactly what happened. Alexandre shared his story, explaining how he found Alice, took her to the hospital, and performed the emergency surgery. Osmar listened intently. Mauricio, is this true? He asked, directing his question to the head surgeon. Mauricio nodded, looking uncomfortable. Yes, Mr. Gusmão. But I was following hospital protocols. Osmar pondered for a moment before making his decision. Mauricio, I appreciate your commitment to protocols, but in emergencies we need to be flexible. Dr. Alexandre acted correctly by saving a life. You're fired for not recognizing that. Dr. Alexandre, from now on, you'll be the new head surgeon of this hospital. Alexandre was stunned, unable to believe what he was hearing. Sir, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much, he replied, emotional. Vittoria smiled, satisfied with the outcome. Osmar placed a hand on Alexandre's shoulder. Just keep doing the excellent work you already do. This hospital needs people like you, Osmar said, smiling at Alexandre. As they left the room, Alexandre felt a wave of hope and renewed determination. Vittoria looked at him with a kind smile. You deserve this, Alexandre, and I'm here to help with anything you need, she said. In the days that followed, Alexandre's life changed significantly. The news of his appointment as head surgeon spread quickly through the hospital, bringing respect and curiosity from his colleagues. But more than the new position, it was the constant presence of Vittoria and Elise that marked the biggest transformation in his life. Alexandre and Vittoria started spending more time together, initially to discuss hospital matters. They began to meet for lunch or coffee, and those work meetings soon turned into moments of camaraderie. Vittoria was smart and determined, with a strong sense of justice. She admired Alexandre not only for his surgical skills, but also for his compassion. Alexandre found in Vittoria a formidable ally, someone who understood the challenges of his profession and supported him unconditionally. Their friendship deepened. Conversations about work turned into discussions about life, dreams, and fears. Alexandre felt comfortable sharing stories about his mother Joanna, who inspired him to pursue medicine. Vittoria shared tales from her own childhood and the lessons she learned from her father Osmar. Meanwhile, Alice was thrilled to have Alexandre around. She loved his visits and the small acts of kindness he always showed. Whether helping her with homework or just playing at the park, Alexandre became a special figure in Alice's life. She felt safe and loved, and her bright smile reflected the warmth in their surroundings. One day, during a walk in the park, Alice held Alexandre's hand as they strolled together. Vittoria watched with a smile, feeling a comforting warmth in her heart. The dynamic between them was becoming increasingly familiar, almost like a real family. Uncle Alexandre, can you come for dinner with us tonight? Alice asked, her eyes sparkling with hope. Alexandre looked at Vittoria, who nodded with a smile. Of course, Alice, I would love to, he replied, filled with joy. That evening, the dinner was full of laughter and shared stories. Vittoria's house, which had once seemed big and empty, was now alive with energy. Alice beamed with happiness, and Vittoria couldn't contain her joy at seeing her daughter so content. After dinner, while Alice drew in the living room, Vittoria and Alexandre chatted in the kitchen. Thank you for everything, Alexandre. You've brought so much joy to our lives, Vittoria said sincerely. No, thank you, Vittoria. You've brought so much happiness to my life, too. I feel at home here, Alexandre said with a warm smile. The feelings between him and Vittoria were growing deeper. There was a special connection that went beyond friendship, something they both felt but hadn't said out loud yet. As the evening went on, Alexandre said goodbye to Vittoria and Alice, promising to return soon. Walking back to his apartment, he thought about how lucky he was to have found such special people. He felt that his mother, Joanna, would be proud of him. Meanwhile, Vittoria was putting Alice to bed and couldn't stop smiling. She knew her life was changing for the better, and Alexandre was a big part of that. As she turned off the lights and got ready for bed, she thought about how bright the future looked with Alexandre by her side. Day by day, the bond between Alexandre, Vittoria, and Alice grew stronger. It was a bond of love and friendship, promising new hopes and possibilities. The weeks flew by, and the relationship between Alexandre and Vittoria became even more solid. Their routine was filled with moments of affection and connection, making Alexandre realize he was ready to take a step forward. He wanted Vittoria and Alice to be a permanent part of his life. One night, as they shared dinner, Alexandre decided it was the right time. The atmosphere was lively, with Alice excitedly sharing her school projects and Vittoria telling stories from her day at the hospital. Alexandre felt nervous, but confident. "Vittoria, can we talk a bit after dinner?" he asked, trying to stay calm. "Of course, Alexandre," she replied, smiling with curiosity. After dinner, while Alice was busy drawing in the living room, Alexandre and Vittoria sat on the porch. The night was peaceful, with a gentle breeze. "Vittoria, I want to talk about something that's been very important to me lately," Alexandre began, holding her hand. "Since I came into your lives, I've felt something I've never felt before. You've become my family, and I don't want that to change." Vittoria looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion, waiting for what would come next. "Alexandre, I love you. I love Alice. I want us to be a real family. Would you like to date me?" he said, his heart racing. With tears in her eyes, Vittoria smiled widely. "Alexandre, I love you too, and there's nothing I want more than to be with you. Of course I'll date you," Vittoria replied, wrapping her arms around Alexandre in a big hug. He felt an overwhelming wave of happiness at her words. They kissed, marking the start of a new adventure together. Alice, watching from a distance, rushed over with a huge smile. "Uncle Alexandre, are you going to be ours for real now?" she asked excitedly. "Yes, Alice. Now we're a real family," Alexandre said, lifting her up and spinning her around. From that moment on, the relationship between Alexandre and Vittoria blossomed even more. They shared not just their personal lives, but also a strong partnership at the hospital. Alexandre was increasingly respected and admired by his colleagues, not just for his surgical skills, but for his kind heart. Patients noticed the difference, feeling safe and secure in his care. Meanwhile, Alice loved the idea of Alexandre becoming a permanent part of her life. She enjoyed learning new things from him and felt loved and protected. Their new family dynamic was warm and filled with joy. One weekend, they decided to have a picnic in a nearby park. The afternoon was filled with laughter and play. Watching Vittoria and Alice having fun, Alexandre felt a deep peace. He knew he had found his place in the world. "You are everything to me," Alexandre said, pulling Vittoria close and hugging Alice. "And you are everything to us," Vittoria replied, giving him a gentle kiss. And so their lives flowed in a happy, harmonious rhythm. Together they faced challenges, supported each other, and celebrated every small triumph. The love they shared grew stronger each day, bringing new hopes for the future. As the months went by, Alexandre's work at the hospital became more intense. As the head of surgery, he dealt with complex cases that challenged his skills. There were also rivalries, with some colleagues questioning his decisions. But Alexandre stood out for his relentless dedication and exceptional ability. He made well-informed decisions and was always willing to listen to his team. During this challenging time, Vittoria was right by his side, offering unwavering support. Vittoria understood how stressful Alexandre's job was, and she always did her best to help him relax and feel valued at home. Her encouraging words were like superpowers that gave Alexandre the strength he needed to face each day. "You're amazing, Alexandra. We're all so proud of you," Vittoria said one night after a long day at the hospital. "I don't know what I would do without you, Vittoria. Your support means the world to me," he replied, his eyes shining with gratitude. Months flew by, and Alexandra and Vittoria's relationship grew even stronger. Alice, Vittoria's daughter, was also thriving under their love and care, getting closer to Alexandra each day. Together, they formed a happy family. One day, Alexandra decided it was time to take an important step. He planned a special night to ask Vittoria a big question. He booked a cozy restaurant and dressed up nicely. When they arrived, the atmosphere was just right. After a delicious dinner filled with laughter and conversation, Alexandra held Vittoria's hand, looking into her eyes with a warm smile. "Vittoria, these months with you have been the best of my life. You and Alice bring me happiness I never thought possible. Will you marry me, Vittoria Guzmo?" With tears of joy in her eyes, Vittoria smiled wide and said, "Yes, Alexandre. I want to spend my life with you." Alexandra slipped the ring onto her finger, and they hugged tightly, feeling the promise of a bright future together. The news of their engagement made Alice jump with joy, and their lives became even more intertwined in love and commitment. As they faced the challenges of the hospital and life, Alexandra knew that with Vittoria and Alice by his side, there was no obstacle they couldn't overcome. The months after their engagement were filled with excitement. The couple started planning their wedding, considering every detail with care. Alice, now 11, was thrilled to be the flower girl and helped with everything. "Mom, look at this dress. I think it would be perfect," Alice said, showing a catalog. "It's beautiful, Alice. Let's try on some dresses to see which one looks best on you," Vittoria replied, smiling. While Vittoria and Alice were busy with wedding details, Alexandra had an important job, organizing the reception. He wanted everything to be perfect for the big day and worked hard to make every aspect special. But it wasn't always easy. There were stressful moments and tough decisions, but their family's love made them strong. "I know it can be stressful sometimes, but we're in this together. In the end, it will be a perfect day because we'll all be together," Alexandra said, holding Vittoria's hand during a tense moment. "You're right, Alexandra. The most important thing is that we're celebrating our love and family," replied Vittoria, smiling warmly. As the big day got closer, excitement filled the air. Friends and family couldn't wait to celebrate with them, and the house buzzed with laughter and joy. It was a happiness only true love could bring. Finally, everything was ready. The venue was decorated with stunning flowers, the menu was set, and the invitations were sent. Alexandra, Vittoria, and Alice were ready to start a new adventure together, surrounded by their loved ones. The night before the wedding, the family gathered for a cozy dinner. They laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed each other's company. Alexandre looked at Vittoria and Alice, feeling deeply grateful. "Tomorrow is going to be an unforgettable day. I'm so thankful to have you by my side," said Alexandra, filled with emotion. "We're grateful to have you, Alexander," replied Vittoria, with Alice nodding excitedly. Then, the wedding day arrived. The house was buzzing since dawn, with friends and family helping with the final touches. Alice, radiant in her flower girl dress, dashed around full of energy, making sure everything was perfect. The ceremony venue was a magical garden, bursting with colorful flowers. Rows of white chairs lined up toward the altar, adorned with flower garlands and ribbons, and in the background, the soft sound of a harp created a dreamy atmosphere. Vittoria looked stunning in her wedding dress, surrounded by her friends and family in the preparation room. They were helping her with the final touches, sharing laughter and even a few happy tears. Suddenly, Alice burst in, holding a little bouquet of flowers, and gazed at her mom with admiration. "Mom, you look beautiful," exclaimed Alice, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Thank you, sweetheart. You look wonderful too." "I'm so happy you're part of this special day," replied Vittoria, wrapping Alice in a warm hug. Across the garden, Alexandra was with his groomsmen, adjusting his tie and trying to calm his nerves. He looked at the altar and imagined Vittoria walking toward him, filling his heart with emotion and gratitude. When the moment finally arrived, everyone took their places. The music changed to the wedding march, and everyone stood up, turning to see Vittoria entering the garden, accompanied by Alice. Alexandra's eyes filled with tears of happiness at the sight. Vittoria looked like a dream, and Alice, walking confidently beside her mom, radiated joy. The ceremony began with the officiant speaking about love and the journey Alexandra and Vittoria had taken to reach this moment. Each word was filled with meaning, reflecting the deep commitment they were about to make. Alexandra, do you take Vittoria as your lawful wife to love, honor, and protect her in all moments of life? Asked the officiant. I do, with all my heart, Alexandra replied, his voice steady and full of emotion. And you, Vittoria, do you take Alexandre as your lawful husband, to love and support him through all of life's stages? Continued the officiant. I do, with all my heart, Vittoria answered, her words echoing the deep love she felt. Alice, moved, held her bouquet tightly, smiling from ear to ear. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Alexandra and Vittoria kissed, sealing their commitment in front of everyone. The guests clapped and cheered, sharing in the joy of the moment. The reception was a vibrant celebration of love and togetherness. One by one, friends and family shared heartfelt stories about Alexandra and Vittoria's journey and how special their family was. Alice, always by their side, was a picture of happiness, dancing and playing with everyone. When it was time for their first dance, Alexandra and Vittoria glided gracefully to a soft tune. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world around them faded away. They were exactly where they belonged, surrounded by the love of those who mattered most. The night continued with more dancing, laughter, and celebration. The challenges they had faced felt far away, and all that mattered was the bright future ahead. Alexandra, Vittoria, and Alice were more united than ever, ready to tackle anything together. As they danced, Alexandra looked at Vittoria and Alice, feeling incredibly blessed. He knew that no matter what challenges came their way, the love and unity they shared would be their strength. With hearts full of hope and happiness, they celebrated the start of their new life as a loving family. The months after the wedding were filled with joy and peace. They were settling into family life and enjoying every moment together. Their home was always filled with laughter. Then one day, Vittoria started to notice some changes in her body. After weeks of uncertainty, she decided to take a pregnancy test. Heart racing, she waited for the result. When the result finally appeared, her eyes filled with tears of joy. She rushed to the kitchen where Alexandra was making breakfast. Alexandre, I have incredible news, she said, holding up the pregnancy test. Alexandra looked at her, a bit confused, but when he saw the sparkle in Vittoria's eyes, he understood. You're pregnant? He asked, a big smile spreading across his face. Yes, we're having a baby, Vittoria replied, laughing and crying at the same time. Alexandra hugged her tightly, feeling a wave of happiness wash over him. It was a new chapter in their lives, and he couldn't be more excited. When Alice heard the news, she was ecstatic. I'm going to be a big sister, she shouted, jumping for joy. I can't wait to help with the baby. From that moment, excitement filled the house. Alice, full of enthusiasm, started planning everything, making name lists, drawing outfits, and dreaming up adventures they'd have together. Vittoria and Alexandre were thrilled about expanding their family. They prepared the nursery with lots of love, picking every detail. The walls were painted soft colors, and the crib was set up with care. It's going to be a new adventure, right? Alexandra said, assembling the crib. Absolutely. I'm so happy we'll face this together, replied Vittoria, gently touching her belly. Friends and family were also overjoyed. Their home was filled with visits, gifts, and love. The baby was already cherished before arriving. Alice loved feeling the baby kick and was fascinated by the ultrasounds showing her little brother. I'm going to be the best big sister ever, Alice declared, determined. The months flew by, full of preparations. Alexandra and Vittoria took prenatal classes and read parenting books. Alice's contagious excitement made everything more special. Finally, the big day arrived. Vittoria went into labor and headed to the hospital. Alexandre held her hand tight, giving his full support. Alice, anxious, waited with her grandparents. After tense hours of waiting, the baby was born. A beautiful boy, healthy and full of life. When Alexandra and Vittoria held their son for the first time, their joy was indescribable. Welcome to the world, Arthur, said Alexandra, tearful. Alice entered the room, looking in awe at her baby brother. He's perfect, Vittoria whispered, gently touching Arthur's tiny hand. Their new family, now complete with one more member, was filled with joy. The happiness and gratitude they felt were immense. Alexandra, Victoria, Alice, and Arthur had a bright future ahead, full of love, adventures, and unforgettable moments. The years flew by quickly, and the lives of Alexandra, Victoria, Alice, and Arthur blossomed in ways they could never have imagined. The family was closer than ever, and the love they shared was the solid foundation upon which they built each day. Alexandre continued to shine as the chief surgeon at the hospital, where his dedication and skill were widely recognized. He not only saved lives every day, but also inspired and guided new doctors, passing on the knowledge and compassion that defined him. Victoria, by Alexandre's side, was his biggest supporter and a respected figure in the hospital. Together, they formed an unbeatable team, balancing their demanding careers with the loving upbringing of their children. Alice, now a young teenager, grew up in an environment full of love and care. She was a bright student, always curious and full of life. The constant support of her parents and the cheerful presence of her little brother Arthur made her feel safe and confident to chase her dreams. Arthur, in turn, was the personification of joy. Since the day he was born, he brought light and laughter to the family. Alice and Arthur shared a special bond, with Alice always eager to care for and play with her brother. As the years passed, Alexandre often reflected on his own path. He remembered his mother, Joanna, and how her dedication and love inspired him to pursue a medical career. He knew that in every life he saved, he honored her memory. Joanna never had the chance to see the man her son became, but Alexandre felt she would be proud. On a quiet day, after a long shift at the hospital, Alexandre sat on the porch of his home, watching his children play in the yard. Victoria joined him, holding his hand and smiling tenderly. "I've been thinking a lot about my mom lately," Alexandre said, with a thoughtful look. "She inspired me to be who I am today. I hope she's proud of me wherever she is," Alexandre said, gazing at the sky. Victoria squeezed his hand lovingly. "She would be so proud, Alexandre. You're an amazing doctor and a wonderful dad. Your mom lives on in everything you do." Alexandre smiled, feeling warmth in his heart. He knew he had built a life full of love, surrounded by a family that supported him. Through his work, he kept helping those in need, honoring his mom's legacy. Looking to the future, he felt strong, knowing they would face any challenge together with love. They had created something beautiful, a true legacy of hope. At that moment, Alexandre realized his life was complete. He honored his mother's memory, had a loving family, and dedicated his life to helping others. Meanwhile, Mauricio was going through a period of reflection. After being fired from the hospital, he began to think about his choices and what needed to change. What happened with Alexandre was a wake-up call for him, showing the importance of flexibility and compassion in medicine. Determined to reinvent himself, Mauricio looked for new opportunities in another city. After a few weeks, he landed a job at a hospital known for caring deeply for patients. This new place was the chance he needed to start fresh and put into practice everything he had learned. He committed to each day, always remembering the impact his decisions could have on people's lives. One day, while reviewing patient files, he came across a case of a very sick child, reminding him of Alice's situation. Mauricio knew he had to act quickly, and this time, he was determined to do the right thing. Mauricio gathered his team and explained the urgency of the situation. He made it clear that they needed to work together with kindness and empathy. Under his leadership, the team worked tirelessly and managed to stabilize the child and start the necessary treatment. The parents of the child were deeply moved and thanked Mauricio and the team with teary eyes. "Dr. Mauricio, we don't even know how to thank you. You saved our daughter and gave us hope when we needed it most," they said, tears streaming down their faces. Mauricio, touched by their gratitude, responded sincerely, "I just did what was right. The health and well-being of my patients will always be my top priority." Over time, Mauricio became a highly respected figure at his new hospital. He not only brought his wealth of experience but also a fresh perspective, focusing on compassion and holistic care. His colleagues and patients started noticing the change, and he was admired not only for his skill, but also for his kind heart. Did you enjoy today's story? Then make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with your friends. See you in the next video.